everyone, it's Nina. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today I have a few cards to share with you featuring the Simon Says Stamp Plush Dies. These plush dies are absolutely adorable, and they're technically meant for using with felt so that you can create little felt plushies, as I like to call them. Those are really adorable, and I have made some of those already, but I wanted to show you how you could take these dies and use them to create embellishments for your cards. So I'm going to be sharing that with you today, along with a bunch of other tips and tricks. So right here I have the newest plush dies that were released by Simon Says Stamp. These are the plush deer, the gentle fox, the little elephant, and the little owl. And I absolutely adore these little dies. These are really cute, and they make the most adorable little critters. Here's a look at the dies, and you can see how you get all the little pieces that you need to be able to create your little plushies. Here I've die cut all the pieces from pattern paper, and I sewed them together. Now when I die cut them from pattern paper and I do the sewing portion, I make sure that I die cut a piece of cardstock as well. That way it gives the pattern paper a little bit more support. So basically when I'm sewing these pieces, I'm sewing the pattern paper and the cardstock together, and that's going to give me a much sturdier piece to be able to build my little embellishments, and also to make sure that the stitching holes are reinforced. So here's how I built each of the little critters. This one's the deer, and I'm going to start gluing all the little pieces together. You can see you got little freckles for the back side of the deer. You've got his little face area that goes right there along where his nose and his eyes are going to end up being. And of course you get some antlers. I'm die cut it twice. You could just use one. I decided to go ahead and use two of them. You're also going to get little ears. I wanted to only put one ear on my deer, but you could definitely go ahead and create two ears. Now here I used a brown nose, but I ended up going back over top of that with a piece of red cardstock. But just so that you can see here, this is how you built the deer, and it's really easy to do. Next I'm going to go ahead and build the owl. I'm going to take the body, which all of these pieces I've die cut from a variety of different pattern papers. The owl and the elephant are both die cut from the Kitty Collection by Doodlebug. But I don't know what any of the other pattern papers that I used on any of the other critters were, just because they were things that I had in my stash, and I don't have the names of the companies anymore. So I don't really know. You might be able to recognize little bits and pieces here and there, depending on if you have that particular paper. But like I said, I don't know the other patterns that I used in this particular project. So I'm going to go ahead and finish building the owl. I'm using the little nose here, which I've die cut from some brown cardstock, and I'm gluing that right to the center of the face. You could also die cut multiple wings, so you could have two wings on this little owl, but I wanted to just use one. And then of course he's got his little feet that you can go ahead and stick along the bottom portion. And there is a heart there that I added to the owl. You don't have to use that, but I thought it would be really cute to have that on there. Now I'm going to go ahead and glue down the pieces to the elephant now. This elephant is so adorable, and my friend Ellen absolutely loves elephants, so I know I'm going to have to make her something using this cute little elephant die. This thing would be adorable to make little ornaments, or any of these dies would actually be great to make ornaments or other types of projects. You can do all sorts of things with these dies. You can see that goes with a bunch of flowers. I actually die cut a bunch here for you so that you can go ahead and see. I'm not going to use them for on the elephant itself. I'm actually going to use them in the scene that the elephant's going to be sitting on, but you could put them anywhere. You could make a little bouquet that the elephant's holding from its trunk. You could put them on its ear for like a little girl card. That would be super cute. But I'm going to go ahead and move on and save those little flowers for my scene. Now for the fox, I'm going to go ahead and put the little face area onto its body. I just love this red and orange checkered pattern paper for this fox. Really cute. And these patterns really make these dies look really adorable. And you can do this in a variety of different ways. I also use these little felt plush dies to create a watercolored embellishment. And I'll have that video linked here so that you can go ahead and watch it. I've also not shown you how I do the stitching. I'll have a couple videos linked in the video description and also up on the screen here so that you can go ahead and watch those, and it shows you how I did the stitching. But this is really easy to stitch together. These are super fun and super easy, and kids can even do this too, which is a really great project for being able to do like little kids crafts. Really fun. Now I'm going to go ahead and glue its feet together, and I've added some ears. Now technically these ears are actually the feet, but I really like the stitching detail, so I wanted to make sure I used those for the ears, and I just turn them around so that way they're pointy up at the top. I'll glue the little white areas for his tail down. And then one thing I'll mention, if you're going to want to go ahead and die cut this from some felt, Simon Says Stamp has a ton of felt colors, and they're really great quality. It's one of the felts that I have in my stash, and it's definitely the one I reach for most often when I do create felt things. So I'll have that linked in the video description as well in case you don't want to create anything with pattern paper. You could create something with felt. Now I'm also going to glue on the little paw prints for his feet. I think these are adorable, and I ended up cutting them from pink, but you could use any color that you wanted. Now I wanted this fox to hold a heart. This heart is from the Memory Box Stitched Hearts dies, and I needed, of course, some paws. So I took, these pieces are technically the ears. These pieces I'm going to create little paws out of, so that way he can hold this heart, and it looks super cute, I think. So all I did was I cut a little rounded end on each side of those little ears, and then I'll go ahead and glue those in place. It's not perfect, but you know what? The whimsical feel of these critters really helps make those paws look perfect. Okay, so here's all the little critters all put together. Now the only thing I have left to do is I need to add some eyes, and for that I just used some Nuvo Crystal Drops. I used the ebony black color, and that worked perfectly for creating little eyes on there. But the dies also do come with eyes in case you want to use that instead. So now I want to show you how I created the cards that these little critters sit on. I'm not going to walk you through all the steps, but I'm going to show you some techniques that I used on each card. So first I've got this little reindeer card. I think this one's super cute. And I love all the elements and how they came together to create this little scene. It's very simple. There's a lot of white space, but I wanted to show you the texture that the snow has. This stuff is awesome. This is the Hero Arts Puff White Embossing Powder, and this is really, really fun. And I actually used a technique that I'm going to share with you on how I made that even more dimensional. So let me show you here first the other products that I've used. Here's the White Puff Embossing Powder. This just came out from Hero Arts for their newest release, their winter release, and I just love this stuff. It's really, really fun. You can create some really fun results with it. What I used is some PPA matte adhesive. Instead of using embossing ink to go ahead and stamp down onto the paper, I used the glue, and then here's the regular bottle of the PPA matte adhesive. I actually used this little bottle to do all of my gluing because the big bottle is just, it's humongous and it's just awkward. So I just refilled that little bottle, and I'll go ahead and show you how I created that snow here in a second. Now for the hill, I used the Lawn Fawn Stitched Border Dies. Really, really great for creating hills, with little snowy hills, any types of little slopes that you need. I've even used this to create beaches. Then I've also used the Simon Says Stamp Stitched Banner Dies. These just came out in the previous Simon Says Stamp release, and I used a variety of sizes to create my little banners for my sentiments, and also just one for a little bit of pattern paper. Really, really great die set, and I really love having this one in my stash. It's one that I reach for often. And then of course I've also needed something for the background. Now it's hard to see in the video, but I'll show you a close-up look later on. But I used this stencil to create a debossed effect into my paper, which helped create a little bit of a little scene in the background. Now I want to show you a tip here about the Nuvo Crystal Drops. When you're applying your drops, you don't want to apply them with the nozzle pressed onto the paper. You want to drop the droplets, literally, onto your paper. You want to keep that nozzle up above the paper and just drop it down. And that gives you the perfect little droplet on your paper and makes the perfect little half dome shape. Okay, now the other thing I want to show you is I want to show you how I created this really cool puffed up snowy look. This is really, really fun and super easy too. All I did was I took that PPA matte adhesive and I put down a layer of glue all over where I was going to want that embossing powder to be. So here I'm just doing some squiggles along the edge of this stitch border die, and I'm just going to go ahead and run this all the way around until I have the entire border covered, and show you here how I have all that glue applied down. Just really, it's really random. I added some squiggles. It's just kind of whatever I felt like doing. Now I'm going to take that white puff embossing powder and I'm going to cover all that glue with that powder. And that glue is of course going to hold the powder because it's of course wet and it's glue. And now I'm going to go ahead and heat set this. Now it does take a little bit longer to heat set it because of course we're trying to dry the glue that's underneath. But once you go ahead and get that glue dried and you start to see the embossing powder react to the heat, it creates the most awesome puffed up appearance. I absolutely love it. This is a really, really fun technique to create some really cool dimensional snow. So here's a close-up look of that dimensional look. Now I will mention that this embossing powder is still soft when it's hot after you first heat set it. Let it cool for a minute. Once it cools, it will be hard and it won't end up moving or anything. But I did want to mention that in case you do find that your powder is soft and it kind of squishy, just let it dry and it'll be fine. Now I also want to show you how I created the snowflakes. I just put dots of glue on my paper and I covered it with the embossing powder, and I went ahead and heat set this until the powder puffed up and created that cool puffy snow appearance. This is a really fun technique, and I'm going to be using this a lot more often because I love how this creates this really cool effect. I've done this before with embossing paste, but I wanted to try it with the embossing powder so that you can go ahead and see how this turns out really cool. Here's a close-up look of that embossing powder snow. Now the other thing I want to mention is how I created the debossed background on my card. And again, it's hard to see in the pictures. It just was a hard thing to capture with my camera. Because it's a white background, that debossed appearance is very subtle, which is what I wanted for my card, but it's also hard to capture in a picture. So to create this look, I'm taking my Sizzix platform and I put it on tab 1. And I'm going to take the Sizzix Textures impression plate. Now this could be a cutting plate. You don't have to use the impression plate, but I'm using that because I have it. And now I'm going to take the Sizzix silicone rubber mat. Now this is important. You do want an embossing mat. You could also even try a mouse pad because it's the same kind of texture and consistency. And then I put my paper and my stencil on top of that sandwich and covered it with my cutting plate. And I'm going to go ahead and run this through my Big Shot machine. And what this is going to do is this is going to create a debossed effect into my paper, almost like if you had used an embossing folder. Now here's that great look of that embossed impression that you get into your paper. This footage captured it well, which I was really excited. You can see it has that great debossed effect, and also on the back side you could use that instead to go ahead and create a more embossed look. So I just wanted to zoom in here so you could see that great appearance. And that's what ended up being on the background of my card. And I just love how it adds that nice subtle background and kept the card from being too plain, but also wasn't distracting to the rest of the elements. Okay, so our next card is that super cute fox. I love how adorable he is. He would make a great card for all sorts of different types of occasions. Now, you can also see some of the cool features I've added to this card. You can see that great stitching background. I'll go ahead and show you how I did that then in a second. I also have that really cute heart, which we used the heart dies from Memory Box to go ahead and create that. And layering this onto this card with very simple appearance really just was a perfect way to be able to finish this off. It lets that fox stand out really well, and you really don't need to add a whole lot to make this card look really cool. So I'll go ahead and show you the products that I used here. I've got the heart dies here from Memory Box. These are a nesting hearts dies, and you have a bunch of different sizes. I used that third one there in the middle, and that just created a nice little size for this image. The next product I used was the Nuvo Crystal Drops to go ahead and create the eyes. Again, I used this on all the cards, and it was perfect color for the eyes. Another product I used was the My Favorite Things Basic Stitch Line Dies. I taped these all together. You, of course, could cut them apart when you get them, which I had done. But I wanted them lined up together so that I could create a really cool background. Now, of course, you could do this by die cutting each stitching line one by one, but that would have taken forever, and I wasn't going to do that. But I wanted to be able to tape them together so that way I could go ahead and create a repetitive background that added some texture to the background of this card, but yet it wasn't distracting. So this is how I did it. It's really, really easy. So I take those taped dies and I lay them down onto my paper, and I'll go ahead and run this through my Big Shot machine just like I would if I'm die cutting anything else. I'll take the dies off and you can see that great stitching detail that it adds to the card. Really, really cool. I love this effect. Now I went ahead and repeated this multiple times until I had covered my entire card base. So as you can see here, I'm just adding that back up onto the paper, lining it up next to the last die from that first cut that we made. And I went ahead and repeated that 3 times until I covered this piece of paper. Depending on the size of your paper, you may need to do more passes through your machine or less. All depends on what size of paper you're using and trying to cover with those stitching lines. But it's a really great way to add some nice texture and pattern to your paper without getting too distracting. Now here's a look at another card that I created using the cute little elephant that I just absolutely adore. He's just like the cutest little elephant ever. And I went ahead and created a baby card from this. Now to create the baby card, I went ahead and used a variety of products. You can see that great debossed background that I have there on my card base. I did the same exact technique that I did for the reindeer card, except I used this stencil here from Neat and Tangled. This is a really cool pattern. I thought this would just make a really neat background for this particular card. I thought it reminded me of a quilt, so I thought that would look good with the stitching details that we have on this card. Now those flowers are from this particular elephant die, and you can see I've die cut a bunch of them from a bunch of different colors of cardstock. And I added some Nuvo crystal drops in these 3 colors here. And I just used those to go ahead and add the color into the center of each flower. And this creates really cool centers for the flowers, and these Nuvo drops can be used to create all sorts of different types of embellishments. I really love these. These are a really fun product to have. And of course, then I also used the black for his eye. And then here's a close-up look of those flowers, and a really great way on how you can use those flower dies to not only create something on the elephant itself, but you could use them to create little embellishments on your scenes. Now, a couple other products that I used here are the stitch banner dies, of course, from Simon Says Stamp. Now, for this one, I wanted it to be a little bit of a shorter and wider banner, so I just cut off the bottom portion of that largest banner, and I went ahead and heat embossed that little sentiment from the Cuddly Critters accessories stamp set. Both of these, of course, are from Simon, and those were great to pair together with this elephant. It was a really great match for creating this baby card. And then those grass lines along the bottom there, I just used this grass border die from My Favorite Things to go ahead and create that. And all of these papers are, again, from that kitty collection from Doodlebug. Now, finally, we've got this adorable little owl. He is so, so cute and so sweet. I created a cute little scene for this little owl. Now, I went ahead and used a variety of different products that just came out from the Simon release, and you can see here they paired really well together to create this fun little card. The first element that we used was the Send Me Love sentiment from the Hydrangea Blooms. This is totally not going to match the card, but the sentiment worked perfectly for this little owl, and I thought it would be really cute. Now, this background has this really cool birch tree die. I absolutely love this because it doesn't actually cut anything out that you can glue onto a card, but it cuts out like a window that has birch trees in it. It's so cool and creates this really cool dimensional feel when you pop it up with foam tape like I did here. I just put some paper behind it that I had that was a little bit of a scene here. And I just used that to go ahead and create my scene for my little owl. Here's a close-up look of that die cut out. So you can see here it creates this really cool window. I think this would be awesome to create like a winter scene or a sunset scene or even a shaker card if you wanted to. This would be so cool. I could really see a shaker card of like a snowy scene with that tree. That would be awesome. Now, I also have these holiday shape dies. These are an older die from Simon Says Stamp, but I love it because it's a great basic die, and I used it to add some hearts. And I covered those hearts with the Nuvo Crystal Drops. This is the White Blizzard color, and I love this because it's just a clear shimmer, and I added, of course, that black with the eyes. These are great little products to have in your stash. Now, finally, I used this new background die from Simon Says Stamp. This is the Tiny Dots and Hearts, and I used this to create the tone-on-tone background that you see on this card base. Now, this card base is a very subtle pattern. You can see a close-up look of it here. I just used some sea glass cardstock and some sea glass ink to create that nice tone-on-tone effect, and I just love how it adds that nice little subtle pattern to the background. So I hope this has given you a good look on not only how to use the Simon Says Stamp plush dies to create some really cool fun embellishments, but also a couple of new techniques that you can try to create fun effects on your cards as well. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below, and head on over to my blog where you can get more information on all of these cards, including still pictures and the products used, and I'll also have links to all the new products that Simon Says Stamp has released for their newest STAMPtember release. STAMPtember, of course, is a huge event for Simon Says Stamp, and I'll be having inspiration for you all month long, featuring some of the newest products and some fun ideas. So if you enjoyed this video, here's another one you might like featuring the Simon Says Stamp plush dies. Please give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you can connect with me on social media at Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, as well as my blog. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you again soon.